talk a little bit today about wireless security. Wireless is really something that we love to love and love to hate. Wireless is wonderful. I bet every one of you's got a wireless device, much more sophisticated than mine, because I hear them all the time. Mine, people talking about all this interaction, mine interacts with the keypad, you know, when you dial the number. That's about it. But wireless is a really good deal, and we watched that little short video the other day about Bluetooth, listening on the Bluetooth hacking. Wireless can cause a lot more issues, and they talk about the TJX Corp wireless hacking, and the number of credit cards is huge that got stolen over a period of several years. And that's one of the things that you'll read also is a lot of times people don't know that they've been compromised. That's part of setting up baselining and checking what's going on, and in my simple vocabulary, pay attention to what's going on your network. Just kind of paying attention. Has anything changed? What did change? Are you looking at the logs? Who's been on these machines? Should they have been on these machines? What kind of auditing do you have set up? Are people in these areas that probably shouldn't be in these areas? Are odd things happening to some users' accounts? They would obviously have to tell you that. That all becomes part of the education system. I forgot my password. Golly, did I really forget my password, or did somebody change my password? You ever think about that? All these people have forgot their passwords, and it really doesn't work, the password that they've been using for probably too long, and why did it change all of a sudden? Maybe somebody changed it for them. Chris got ERD Commander. Really cool piece of software, right? But we can break you on that, can't we? By simply not allowing the CD to boot. Configuration management. What are you going to do? How much security do you need? And I think that's one of the first rules of security is don't spend more on the security for the device than the device is worth. And a lot of people get hung up on, we're going to make this really secure. And you've got to balance security with usability. And hopefully that's what, when we finish up this project that you're working on, the wireless security in 802.1x, we'll talk about in here, is the protocol that we want to talk about. 802.1x can be used on both wireless and wired networks. You can install 802.1x controls on a layer 2 switch where the port doesn't get turned on, which means you don't get an IP address until you actually get authenticated to the network. And you can, in that, authenticate either the users or the computers, whichever you choose. So there are lots of options when you start doing the lower level configurations. The objectives describe the basic 802.11 wireless security protections. And yes, WEP is not a high-powered secure protocol. And WEP was never designed to be a highly secure protocol. WEP was designed to protect you from the casual observer, for lack of better words. It wasn't designed to protect against dedicated hackers. Since all of the problems with WEP, the security protocols have been improved. We had WPA and WPA2 that are much better ones, and those allow us to use some of the extensible protocols, the 802.1x, which I want you to use in this other one. The vulnerabilities of open system authentication, WEP, and device authentication. And why is, random thoughts here, why does this become such an issue? Who can see your wire? I mean, on a wired network, we're really confined, are we not? Or at least we're sort of confined. People might climb in through the false ceilings and patch something in, or walk in. Sam's not here for me to pick on. Walk in and just plug in a laptop. Well, we're just going to plug in a laptop. We're going to plug in a wireless access point. We're going to become a secure rogue wireless access point. How's that? We use 802.1x authentication on our rogue wireless access point. We'll have a rogue, but we want to be really particular about who gets on it. But we could just walk in and plug in something. However, we have a lot more ability to control physically what goes on. Can you control who comes into your parking lot? You could if you set your security back that much farther. Can you control who is trying to use a directional antenna against your wireless? How? What's really the maximum range of this stuff? How far it can reach? I mean, people talk about ranges of up to a mile for these. What? 300 meter, 100 meter, whatever it's supposed to be, 100 meter. Yeah, and how many outside? 500? 1,000. Still less than a mile. Depends. That's line of sight with nothing in the way. What if I can pick up your signal for a mile? What kind of antenna do I have? What kind of antenna do you have? How can you control the signal? What if we built a Faraday cage around the building to limit the signal? Yeah, that would do it too. What if we used directional antennas on our wireless and turned the power down where it didn't go outside? Now, the ones that I own, the ones you own, probably you don't have the ability to control that, but you can control the power out on the antennas on a number of these things, as long as you buy the higher level ones. Or you get the Linksys has got one volume out. Somebody put out a Linux OS for it, and it actually has the ability to control the power. You can do a lot of different things with it. Those are pretty highly desired. WPA2 and WPA2 personal security models, and what we're generally going to use in here is a Preshared key still or a passphrase. Passphrase is probably the most popular. Problem with Preshared keys are keeping them confidential, because if you share it, don't tell anybody. How does that work? Keep that secret. How's that work? Yeah. Tell one person. Come in here and, hey, how do I get onto the wireless? If we went through an approval process, anybody can get on the wireless in here as long as you have a username and password. But let's say that you smokers are out in the smoking area, and somebody wanders up that you don't know, and I'm sure you know every student in the building, right? And somebody wanders up to you and says, hey, I've been trying to get on this wireless. What's the key? What's the code? And you thinking they're a student, say, okay, you tell it to them. And they're not a student. We've just had a couple of things there when we've had some social engineering, because they convinced you, not really, but they convinced you that they were a student, and then you gave them some information that they wanted. Now they're on your wireless network if we're using a Preshared key. And what's the problem with that? All of those firewall controls that we haven't talked about but will, that we set up are useless, because where's the wireless access point? Right in the middle of your network, usually, depending on how you're using it, how you got it configured. This one that we use is configured probably a little more securely, because when you get onto it, where can you get on that wireless? Just the internet. You can't get onto any of the local resources. So from that standpoint, give somebody internet access, but not really as dangerous to your network. How enterprises can implement wireless security, and that's what we're going out with with the 802.1x project configuration, how to actually go through and set it up. IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, been around for a long time. It's the most widely known and influential organizations in computer and wireless. They set the standards is what this one is all about. So what do we do to use these things? In the 80s, they began work on developing computer network architecture known as Project 802. The 802 dot whatever, the dots are the subgroups. So they started working, because we got 802 dot I call it 802.x. You've heard that before. 802.2, 802.3, 802.5, 802.6, on and on and on, 11 and 12, those things. 802.11 is the work group that's working on wireless. So they had that thing, formed a committee to develop the standard for wireless local area networks with a speed of 1 and 2 million bits per second. That sounds really big when you say it in million bits per second instead of 1 megabit and 2 megabit, huh? The 1 megabit and the 2 megabit became, and that's the real standard for 802.11b. So they established, although they normally go faster, and then the G's go even faster. Approved the standard in 97. Revisions 802.11a, b, g, and n are the ones that we have now. A is kind of an interesting standard. They'll have a slide here in a minute, because it's a different frequency than the other ones. The other ones have compatibility because they're using the same frequency. 11A uses 5 gig, shorter range, higher speed. It really never caught on, but some people are still using it. And if you think about it, probably makes a lot of sense to use in business, because these others are using, what, 2.4 gig? And 2.4 gig is kind of like an open frequency range, an unregulated frequency range that everything in the world runs on. Cordless phones, microwaves, wireless joysticks, wireless game controllers. Yeah, some remote controls. Fluorescent lighting, yeah, and that's the truth. So there's lots of things out there to interfere with that frequency. What do you want to do? How much isolation do you want to have? How much isolation can you provide? Controlling access, and that's what we really want to do with our wireless access point. True? Can we prevent people from seeing our signal? Turn off the broadcast. That kind of does, but it really doesn't, because that SSID is in other frames that go out. And these things broadcast a frame every 10 seconds or something like that. It says, here I am, connect to me. Here I am, connect to me. And you can do some scanning, and you can find those that the SSID is turned off. But you still have to broadcast the signal, because the signal has to be there, even if you don't broadcast the SSID in it. But is there any real way to keep people from seeing our signal? You can turn it off. And that's always the answer, right? We make it really secure, just turn it off. Not very useful, though. Do you have to have your SSID on all the time? If your broadcast, your radio on all the time, if you're using it for wireless, obviously. Sometimes you set these things up, or at least I do, that I'm not really using the wireless signal. Turn the radio off when you're not using the wireless signal. In business, that's probably not going to be the case. But it becomes really an issue trying to keep people from seeing the signal. And if you can see the signal, then you can start manipulating. The other thing is, hey, let's just use MAC filtering. True? We'll pick on Chris because he's still doing his homework. What did we see on that MAC filtering? Would MAC filtering have done us a whole lot of good? When we looked at Cain and Abel? We could spoof it, because Cain and Abel, hey, we just go get the MAC address. One of the approved MAC addresses that's on the thing. Wait till it goes away. Spoof the MAC address. And there's lots of softwares out there that spoof MAC addresses, particularly for wirelesses. I read a story, and I don't recommend this because it's not legal. Somebody in an airport, how much do they charge you for wireless access in the airport? $10. $10 for like 2 hours or something like that? While you're there. How could you get that for free? How do you think that they regulate who gets on the wireless access point?
Probably one of those like a web page thing.
Probably things like a web page thing. I don't think so. It could be. Like they mean like we use? We have to have a username and password?
Like that, yeah.
Whoa, boy.
And they're like, hey, bro.
let's see. If we're going to do that, that means that we have to have a database somewhere. Let's investigate Sam's idea here. We have to have a username and a password somewhere. You think that the airport's going to put your username and password in for 2 hours? They going to hire somebody to do that? What's the easy way? If I pay for it with my credit card, they just take the MAC address on my machine. That works, and then we use MAC filtering. What if we don't want to pay? Huh? Put a sniffer till you find somebody's already gone. Find their MAC address, put that into your MAC address, and bingo. And that's exactly what this person did. And no, I don't recommend it because, yes, it probably is illegal. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is when we do those kinds of filtering, how strong is the security? If anybody can see it, and they can because it's an unregulated frequency, nobody assigns you that frequency, can anybody see it? Well, it's kind of interesting, I think, sometimes. Take your laptop and get NetStumbler. NetStumbler is a piece of software that finds wireless networks. Drive down the street, see how many open wireless access points you find. Just run something around your house, unless you're really out separated from people. How many wireless access points? I have several around my house. Some of them are secured, some of them are not secured.
I actually don't bother securing mine just because
you're so far away.
Yeah, the only person that could possibly pick up is my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And I'd probably faint if I found out they actually knew how to turn a computer on.
Oh, yeah. Well, if somebody drives into your driveway, driving down this road.
Someone's almost always home at my house, so. Like I said.
Huh?
Go to the neighborhood, find some townhouses.
Hey, the best place, go to any given, that's right, go to any given apartment building. And we're going to talk about, in a minute, I've got in a few minutes, and I don't remember exactly where I put it in, an image about the channels. There really are only 3 channels that are truly available for wireless, even though they tell us there are 12. The way the ranges of the frequencies go, there really are only 6 channels that are available to you. And that's a problem. Let's go back to the apartment houses. That can be a problem in the apartment house, is one wireless access point interferes with another wireless access point because they're on the same channel. If you put in multiple access points, one access point interferes with the other one because they're on the same channel. So all of these things. So access accomplished by limiting the device's access to the access point or other devices' access to the access point. How are we going to do that for real? We'll put in WEP. And if you watch the video, WEP, not really all that difficult to crack. WPA is more difficult. Is it uncrackable? No. It's improved. WPA2 is essentially advanced encryption system, and it is AES, and it is much more difficult to attack. 802.1x, the thing that we're going to use, is what probably should be used in the enterprise because you have all of the pieces available to you, the access point, the database, Active Directory database, and then you can always install the radius server, or you can get an open radius server. I know Sam was looking for an open radius. If you choose to do that, or you can just install the one from Windows. You can put in your own certificate server, which James was working on, to issue the certificate so you don't have to go out and buy them, and you can then tell the devices to trust those certificates. So in the enterprise, you would have all of the pieces to put this thing together. You might not necessarily do that at home. Of course, I guess you could with virtual machines. Restricting access to only those devices that are authorized are able to connect to the AP and become part of the wireless network. And that's always the objective, is to only let the devices on that should be on. If you're the only one using your wireless, you can probably keep that pre-shared key private. But if you're in a business, do you think you're going to keep that pre-shared key private? Have you ever seen the little experiment? This was in Britain. That they were going around in the subway station and offering people a candy bar for their passwords. And like, you know, well over half of them said okay. It's been a good candy bar. I don't really understand the implications, I think, of a lot of this stuff. Huh?
They probably like starved them for a day.
Starved them for a day. In the subway station. They locked them in the subway station. No. But if they do that, you think that, you know, for $5 would you give away the pre-shared key for your wireless access point at your business?
Give them the wrong password.
You give them the wrong one? They may come back. I don't ask for a vote, but would you? And how about 10? How about $10?
Depends on what access they're going to make.
Depends on what access. Now we're getting there. How about $20? $20. Anybody going to sell it for 20?
I mean, if they can't, if it's like the Skyline, they can just get on the internet. $20, why not?
$20, why not?
They can't do damn damage. Well, I guess they could.
I guess they could. What does a hacker initially want? To get in.
First step.
First step in. So for 20, actually, he was going to sell it to me for $10. So for $10, I got my first step made. What's the threat? And that was a good question that he asked. What's the threat? Is it a real threat? Maybe, maybe not. But in this one, you'd have to give them your network credentials, wouldn't you? Have to sell that password for a candy bar.
Yeah, but then you'd be logging off your information, so it looked like you were logging.
Aha! Now we're getting more serious, aren't we?
That'd be a little more money for that.
A little money for that. $100.
That'd be more than that.
That'd be more than that. $100. No, not $100. Okay.
But you gonna live in your car, I'm living take all your assets,
Yeah.
everything. Basically just switch lives to have my phone.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
the Milky Way for your special.
And we talk about media access control. Media access control, yes, for the casual user works great because, so think about sitting down and using a wireless protocol analyzer in order to watch which MAC addresses are connected. Because they're not going to stay connected forever. And once that happens, and just like the airport, watch for what this guy said that he set up a wireless scanner, a wireless sniffer, and watch for the busiest MAC address, and then when it quit working, he put that MAC address into his machine because that one was probably authorized, and that's what that particular airport was using. Some of them use other things. When you go to a hotel, what do they use? Sometimes nothing if they're open. Most of them aren't open, though. Some of them are.
They use software.
Some of them use that
The
web page, yeah, and that's how they charge you. Generally, the ones that charge you use that web page. I had kind of an interesting experience, and I think they were using cookies. Last year before last, I guess, we were in Minneapolis at a hotel, and they had wireless, which was free, and they had wired, which wasn't. The wireless was available in the lobby. I know, she's making funny, because they were trying to sell the wired to the businesses that were there. Because they had all sorts of stuff set up for conferencing, remote conferencing, and things like that. But I could get a wireless signal just barely in the room. It was really pretty irritating. So after I got logged on the first time, and I plugged the wired in, and nothing happened, except I got wired access. So I got worried that they were going to charge me because they charge like $10 a day or $15 a day for the wired access. So I went and asked for the desk, tell me how this wired stuff works. So what happened? So I plugged it in and it didn't ask me anything. And she said, did you get on the wireless first? I said, yeah. Oh, okay, that's why. But they checked, we didn't charge you anything. They were probably using a cookie because it was good for 10 days or something for free wireless. But how are you going to control these things? That probably wasn't a real secure way to do it, was it?
So because you got on the wireless, it saved your credentials.
First time because it saved a cookie because it was the same provider that provided wireless and wired. And then when I plugged in the wired, it just said, okay. Welcome back. Yeah. Welcome to our network. So immediate access control, MAC address filtering is there. Is it the best way to do it? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. This is not really using this, and notice this is saying access point, AP access point, not router. You can use your wireless router as an access point if you so choose to connect your wireless machines to your wired network. We've done that a couple of times here. What you would do is, because these things all have DHCP servers built in, true? Turn off the DHCP server. Turn off the DHCP server, plug the switch into your wired network, the switch part, not the router part. Turn these guys on. When they connect, then they're going to send the discover message. The access point's not going to respond, going to send the discover message to the DHCP server on the wired network. You've now put your wireless machines onto your wired network, your entire wired network. You've made and you can use it as a router or an access point. You made the router an access point. So you can do those things. This is just looking at the keep these devices out, prevent or permit in the MAC control. Honestly, all of these things, all of security, you have to have an initial policy, which is to permit anything or permit nothing, really, don't you? The permit everything and then filter out what you don't want is pretty tough. Do you know all of the MAC addresses for all of the computers in the world that you don't want on your wireless network? Do you know, or can you find the MAC address of the 5 that you do want on your wireless? So what you probably want to do is deny everything and then make these exceptions. So in any kind of security policy, not just wireless, any of them, you got to make a decision as to which way you're going to go, permit everything or permit nothing. And the other one said permit some of the people some of the time. And that's when you make one of these policies like no, and then say we want to trust these particular machines or these particular individuals. Implemented by permitting instead of preventing. WEP, the wired equivalent privacy, the initial attempt at wireless security, designed to ensure that only authorized parties can view transmitted wireless information. It encrypts this stuff, and that's really kind of what we would want to do, is encrypt all of our signals, because if we don't encrypt our data, who can see it? Everybody, anybody with a wireless scanner. And you can set these things up to use WEP for authentication only, can't you? And then not have the encrypted data. Maybe faster. You could also, if you really feel insecure about WEP, and you probably should feel insecure about WEP, the other thing you could do is a VPN from the wireless device, and if the access point supports VPNs, IPsec, you could do a tunnel or an encrypted connection that way that use something other than WEP. And if you haven't watched that video, I would encourage you to, because it's only lasts like 5 minutes, and it doesn't really, maybe we'll watch it after we get done here, it doesn't really take that long to crack WEP. Joel, who was in the other class, had already had security, went to his apartment building and proved that it worked. He said it took him about 10 or 15 minutes to get a key. Not encouraging you to do that unless it's your own network, because it is illegal unless it's your own network. When you do these things, please do these on your own devices. Design WEP to meet the following criteria: efficient, exportable, optional, self-synchronizing, and reasonably strong. Reasonably strong means that really the casual observer, not a dedicated hacker. WEP secret keys have a minimum of 64 bits in length, so we use 64-bit encryption. The options for creating keys are 64-bit or 128-bit or passphrase. Passphrase, to me, is a lot easier to do because I can remember it. The access point and devices can hold up to 4 shared secret keys, and each device doesn't have to use the same key. The access point has all the keys, so we could have Sam with 1 key, Chris with 1 key, James with another key, and Monty with the 4th key on the device itself, the wireless device. And these are kind of the way they look. And this one's showing that laptop on the right laptop is using key 2 and the left laptop is using key 4. The default key is key 1, but the access point has all of the keys, so it can pick which one you're actually using. Controlling access, step 1, CRC cyclical redundancy check. Step 1. Step 2 is the initialization vector of the IV, and this is the real weakness of WEP, because when they're going to tell the number, and I've forgotten what it is, of like 2 million or 4 million keys are the only possibility. You go through those pretty quickly because it uses a different initialization vector for every packet. So the initialization vector plus the secret key gives a random number generator, which gives us the key stream. This is a pseudo random number generator. So we get a pseudo random number, which gives us, when we put all these together, the key stream in step 2. Step 4, they do the XOR, and you get the IV and the ciphertext. The ID, again, the initialization vector. What happens is when they get reused, the initialization vectors get reused, then we have 2 different things that are using the same initialization vector, and that's how it reverse engineers to get the key. Yes?
The secret key, how should you have to have 4 of them?
You don't have to.
What?
You have the possibility, you have the option of having 4 of them.
Do you set the key up yourself, or is it be one of those 4 that says...
No, you set the key. You set the keys yourselves. You can set the keys yourselves, or you can have them auto-generated.
See, I was on like a router the other day, on others, and it showed you all 4 of those
Yes,
keys.
on the access point.
So if I wrote all 4 of those
Yep.
down, or if I just knew them, to say she set up like WPA, it would be one of those 4 keys.
Yeah, that's what you'd have to use on the device. Unless you went in and changed it.
And then saved it.
Yeah. Yeah, personally, I'm kind of a fan of the passphrase.
So, I mean, okay, so the key is different from the password.
Passphrase generates the key. You use the passphrase, the system uses the passphrase to generate the keys.
But if I was on an unsecured network and I wrote down those keys and all of a sudden it became secure, there's probably a likelihood that it would be one of those 4 keys.
Unless somebody changed something in it. I think if you go make it insecure, it doesn't show you the keys anymore. And then when you go back, you can try that when we bring the access point in, turn it off and turn it on, and see what it does with the keys. But I would just about bet it would generate different keys the second time for that exact reason. Initialization vector, the shared secret. The sending device has the initialization vector. RC4 is the cipher, the algorithm. I'll get there in a second. So we got the initialization vector with the algorithm. Get the key string, and then we have the text plus the initialization vector, the IV and the ciphertext, RF transmission back to the receiving device, goes through a reverse process. The problem with WEP, again, is that it said it was a 64-bit, but we're really not using a 64-bit key. It's not using all of that for encryption. The initialization vector is part of it. What they did to make it more secure with WPA is they extended the key length so that they're not repeated as frequently. Wireless LANs can limit access, signal through walls and doors, and there is, and again, I don't know if it's on the market yet or not, there is a film that was developed for military use, that you can put on windows to stop these signals. You can build what's called a Faraday cage, which is basically insulation against the frequency. You ever think about your microwave? That's a 2.4 gig, isn't it? What keeps you from getting cooked? The door. What in the door keeps you from getting cooked? A little piece of metal with those holes drilled in it, huh? Does the glass stop the microwaves? Faraday cage, similar thing. You would really need to put something like that as you built a building. But it is possible to filter those things. It's not inexpensive. Again, how much security do you want? How much security do you need? How much are you willing to pay for it? But it is possible to filter those things.
It's just basically the assumption off of Faraday.
Yeah, yeah. Authentication, open system, and shared key, and they have these are the figures in the book. This is the open system. Laptop sends an association request frame, and that's one of the things that has to happen. It associates with a wireless access point. I need to connect to SSID bill. That's the SSID, and we can do this scan to find the SSIDs of these things. And yes, if you're not broadcasting them, there's software out there that'll find it for you anyway. A lot of the things that they talk about here, again, are not for the dedicated hacker. Somebody really wants to get on. Do they really want to get on Nathan's access point out in the middle of nowhere? Yeah, probably not. But Sam, I know, wants to get on his grandparents' access point, right? Yeah. But they'd probably tell him what it is. But if he lived next door or was in the apartment building and didn't want to pay for it or whatever else, he might want to do that. So open just says, step one, hey, I want to get on, open access, your authenticated SSID bill. We're on. The AP responds with association response frame, and then we have connectivity. This is one that has no security, obviously. When we look at the one, this is what? Shared key authentication. Step one, the laptop sends an authentication frame. I want to authenticate. The access point now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. This is going to be the passphrase. Goes back to this guy. The laptop encrypts the challenge text. Now is a good time. We use the key and we get the encrypted text. So the laptop encrypts the challenge text with the shared key. I lied. This is the challenge text. When we talk about challenges, challenge, handshake, authentication protocol, the challenge is a random something or another that, in this case, the access point sends to the device so that we're actually getting something a little bit different every time. So it sends a random, and usually you're just going to get some random numbers that come out. You then encrypt the challenge with whatever the key is. So now we've created some encrypted text, and it sends back the encrypted text. Where we're going to go over here. Let's go over here. We send back the encrypted text. The AP encrypted text uses the same process, knows what the challenge is, uses the same shared secret, creates, and let's call it a hash because we're doing a comparison here. It could be encrypted. Usually you're going to encrypt text so you can decrypt text. Hashes are typically used for password verification instead of sending the passwords. So then it compares these two. So the challenge introduces a little bit of one further step in security. MAC address filtering and WEP are the primary vulnerabilities. Open system considered weak because all you do is match the SSID. You can turn it off and maybe somebody wouldn't find it, but maybe somebody would find it. If you just go through the computer, they're not going to find it. But I used to have this little wireless finder, looked like a USB key. It found stuff that we went up to a building one time. I was with the network manager, I said, oh, we got a couple of wirelesses here. He said, oh, that's ours, but the SSID is supposed to be turned off. The broadcast is supposed to be turned off. It was, but the device found it anyway, because that information's in other frames other than the broadcast frame. Match the SSIDs, the open system. The easiest way to discover is to actually do nothing. Exploits the beaconing process, and this is if it is turned on. It sends a beacon frame, can attempt to join the network by sending an association request frame back to the access point. If it's open, it's going to let you on. The beacon frame is broadcast regularly by the access point to make it discoverable. Passive scanning, most common type of scanning, a wireless device simply listens for a beacon frame for a set period of time, and when you look at these things, it says you want to refresh the list. This is when it's going to wait to get these beacon frames to see what is actually there. Some wireless sources encourage users to configure the APs to prevent the beacon frame from including the SSID. This was don't broadcast the SSID. Instead, require the users to enter the SSID manually into the device, and you can do that. And on the access points, when you connect to these things, you usually have an option, connect even if you don't see the SSID when you do those. Not beacon can affect roaming, and this would be in an environment where you have multiple access points and you want it to automatically go from one to the other as you're roaming around the building. This is probably Chris and his telephone. Roaming would be good, right, if you never lost connectivity? That's what we use with cell phones. I'm talking about is wired, is web. Can affect devices running XP. The SSID can be easily discovered when not contained in the beacon frames. Is still transmitted in other management frames by the wireless access point. So it's not a guarantee that nobody's going to see it. Are the casual observers just going out and seeing which wireless networks are available and not going to see it? Yeah. But you haven't really hidden it from somebody that wants to get there. Do they care about my wireless access point? I would guess no. Do they care about the wireless access point at Best Buy? Probably. There's lots of point-of-sale devices that are wireless. Speaking of Best Buy, 2 years ago, they had a big problem. They were having a parking lot sale, and they had wireless point-of-sale devices in the parking lot that were connecting wirelessly, obviously, into the building without encryption. So when you bought something in the parking lot, guess what happened to your credit card number? Just sent right in unencrypted, yes. I mean, when we think about it, we think about, I do anyway, when we think about wireless, we think about connecting my laptop to my wireless access point. What we need to think about from where we're going is all of the wireless devices that are around in a business and what kind of vulnerabilities do we have.
Do you know that the people maybe knew that was happening?
I'm sorry?
People that were working outside, they knew that was happening?
No, they eventually found it, and I don't remember why. Probably somebody came up and said, hey, you want this credit card number? I don't know. I don't know how they found it. I don't know if they were doing their own scanning. No, because the people working outside were not the networking people. They were the salespeople. Do the salespeople know about that stuff?
I know, like, I mean, uses with they shouldn't have to put like a sniffer or anything, but a lot of them is not. You can get on their laptop, they have displays, they're all connected to
Yeah. Yeah. Are you going to have a sniffer in the book? You said, but will there be a sniffer on it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on them. I know, like, for certain
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
get on that all the time.
Well, there are and there aren't. I think they use proxy servers to get out of those things. So we can get, even though the SSID is not broadcast, there are softwares that will help you find that SSID. This is the overlap issue. And if these access points are on the same channel, they're going to interfere with each other, just like the microwave would, the wireless phone, anything else, because there is a conflict, a collision here. What we would want for mobile users for the auto roaming is if one laptop from one area went into the other one, it would automatically connect to that access point. This is courtesy of somebody else. The source is www.nts.ku.edu. I guess it'd be like Kansas University, huh? What frequencies are actually available? This is the 802.11a, which they don't really discuss. The 802.11a different frequency has more channels, 11b and g. The problem is the channels aren't on a single frequency. They're on a range of frequencies. You have to have that in order to be able to actually transfer data. So channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, and channel 5 overlap. So channel 1 is an actual real channel. Channel 6 is an actual real channel, and channel 11 is an actual real channel that doesn't have any interference with the other quote channels unquote, because we can set our access point on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 would actually not give you the interference with 1. That's why in the apartment building that Sam was talking about, it's kind of important to know what channel the other access points are on. When you're in an enterprise, it's kind of important to know which channels the other access points are on so that you don't set up your own interference. And what the guy said in this course was, well, I used to put them all on the same channel and it didn't work right. Now I know why. This is kind of a honeycomb of how you might want to set up the channels. Put the first one on 1, next to 11 and 6, and then 1, 11, and 6, so that the ones that are adjacent to each other that might get overlapping signals, that would get overlapping signals if we're doing roaming, are on different channels. MAC filtering, initially exchanged, an attacker can easily see, and we've beaten MAC filtering to death, kind of, sort of. MAC filtering, yes, it's there. Yes, it's going to protect you from the casual user. Is it going to protect you from somebody that's really dedicated? Probably not. One of the steps, though, because that just means that they've got to go then figure out a MAC address that they can use, because you can't always spoof the MAC addresses. Encrypt packets, web can be used 64-bit or 128-bit, which is made up of a 24-bit initialization vector and a 40-bit or 104-bit default key. So even though they say it's a 64-bit, if you're using 64-bit encryption, you really only have a 40-bit key. The initialization vector then takes up an awful lot of it. Relatively short key length is the limit of its strength. Violates the cardinal rule of cryptography. Anything that creates a detectable pattern must be avoided at all costs. The initial vectors would start repeating in fewer than 7 hours, and this is not on a busy access point. How long it takes them to start repeating depends on how much traffic's on the access point. What a lot of the software does is goes back and re-injects the signal and forces activity. If you force activity, you get a different initial vector on each packet. Eventually it's going to repeat, and when it repeats, that's when they can do the comparison and extract the key from that. Possible for an attacker to identify 2 packets derived from the same initial vector, called a collision, because they're the same. Once we do that, then the same initial vector, 2 packets, same IV, then work it backwards to find the key, because the key stream is a method of determining the key stream by analyzing 2 packets that were created from the same IV. That's what the key stream attack is. And this is in your book. We could go through this. You can look at this thing, sit down and study this, how it works. Operation 1 with the plain text, the key stream X, the XOR, and we get a ciphertext A, ciphertext B, and these are going to, I think, have come from the same key stream, and then they match the values in order of the value. When we look at this, the value matches, helps it determine what goes on with these things. So packet 1 has IV 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ciphertext, whatever. Packet 222, that repeated pretty quickly, didn't it? Initial vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ciphertext, whatever. They go through this math operation, which we're not going to do. When we're going to use these things, we're going to use softwares that do all of the calculations for us. And from that can extract the plain text. Once you get the plain text, you can extract the key because you know the initial vector. You don't know the key, you know what the plain text is in both cases. Personal wireless, WPA personal, WPA2 personal, and these are usually going to be pre-shared keys of some sort. The enterprise allows you the ability to use the 802.1x, which obviously you can use at home. Consortium of wireless equipment manufacturers, a wireless Ethernet capability to encourage wireless manufacturers to use the 802.111 technologies, promote and market the technologies, test and certify that the wireless products adhere to the standards, ensure the product operability. What they did, the Wi-Fi Wireless Fidelity Alliance, 2002, changed its name to Wi-Fi, introduced WPA Wi-Fi Protected Access, had the design goal to protect both present and future devices, both wireless authentication and encryption, and you can use it for both or either as you go through these things. Pre-shared key are authenticated through TKIP. TKIP is Temporal Key Internet Protocol. Temporal means that it is a temporary key. So TKIP made the encryption more secure. Pre-shared key uses a passphrase to generate the encryption key, or you can type the keys in yourself. Pre-shared key is the easiest way to do it. Key must be created and entered in both the access point and the wireless devices, or the pre-shared or the passphrase entered in both of them. Prior to the devices communicating with the access point, obviously, is not used. The pre-shared key is not used for encryption. Instead, it serves as a starting point, the seed for the mathematically generating the encryption keys. And sometimes I think you'll hear this term called, the seed called salt. What it is just something that's there. Linux uses a salt on its passwords that are stored locally. Windows does not. Which means that if you take the password file off of a Linux machine that has a salt, you're still going to have a lot of trouble cracking the passwords because you know what the salt is, what the other element is. So we have a seed or a salt in these things. So WPA uses the TKIP, the TKIP uses a longer 120-bit, 8-bit key, are known as per packet keys, the TKIP, because it's a continuously changing thing, provides greater level of security. Well, one of the things that really provides a greater level of security is the actual longer key, not using so much of it for the rest of it. Replaces the cyclical redundancy check with the message integrity check. So it's going to use some sort of a hash to check the integrity. We talked about integrity on like day 2, right? The integrity of it. WPA2 was introduced in 2004, and WPA2 is essentially the AES protocol, which is the newest one, AES in the wireless technology. The second generation still uses the pre-shared key, but instead of TKIP, uses enhanced data encryption, AES, the protocol that it uses. Still uses the pre-shared key. We've talked about this already. The pre-shared key management weakness is the distribution of the key. How do you keep it secret? If it's just you, and you can probably keep it secret. But if it's you and 100 other people, you're probably not going to keep it secret. And if it's in the enterprise, we'll just offer you a candy bar, or in Adam's case, $10. Huh?
Or lunch.
How much you gonna charge? Depends on okay. Depends.
Maybe about 5 million.
But at least everybody's thinking about it. How much am I gonna charge for this thing? What I'm trying to do is point out here is the weakness of these pre-shared keys. The weaknesses of it. Because how are you gonna keep it a secret? For real?
I found
$1 above my annual salary. Would somebody pay you to get on Skyline's wireless? I don't think so. What about TJ Maxx Corporation? What about Best Buy? I'm not talking about the one, the demo one. I'm talking about the business one where they actually conduct business. What about the Kroger one? Boy, a lot of stuff goes through Kroger, huh? Now we've hit on a nerve.
Right above the,
Huh?
right above the register. It's just sitting there hanging out.
Yeah. They're using wireless. They use wireless, huh?
There's a VPN between the little handheld and the U-scan machine, and it
Yeah.
all that data just back and
Yeah, it goes back and forth. And the scales are wireless, aren't they?
It depends on
Which of the stores? Are they encrypted? Are the scales encrypted? I don't know. This was years ago, but one of the Kroger managers said that what really concerned him were the scales, and he said, "Well, why?" Because they're wireless and they were unencrypted wireless. As if you get any point in there, then you're on the network. That's the real scary thought about that. This is a big deal for our wireless. No, because you can get all the way to the internet. What about that other wireless? We were looking at that. What kind of encryption? They had WEP, didn't it? I'm going to keep pricking on Chris because he was watching with me. They had WEP, didn't it, when we did? And we can look at, I put Stumbler on this laptop. You can look at some of those things. And that. Yeah, I believe it was. Can't get what to? That Stumbler? Not compatible?
Yeah, I mean, it shows not network card, but it says not compatible.
Yeah, that happens, and that's one of the things that you're going to find. I'll back up. Many of the security tools that you will find are at heart Linux. And you're also going to find a limited number of cards, wireless cards, that'll work with them.
Is it disabled by default for me, or is it not? You probably don't have a driver for it.
You probably don't have might not have a driver for it. What it does is it disables, and if you watch it, it disables, and you can watch it run on this one. What it really does is takes full control of your NIC. You can't do anything else when you're running Stumbler.
Oh, really?
Because it takes control. Because you're using it for surveillance at that point. Once you've done the surveillance, then you move on to something else. We'll plug this one up. You can look at it. We'll look at it on the break. Use of passphrases, and the passphrases need to be relatively complex. Pre-shared key is 64-bit hexadecimal. The most common way is a passphrase because you got to get the number of digits correct. That's something that always was an issue. Passphrases of fewer than 20 characters can be subject to specific attack and broken, so they should be relatively long. It's not like you have to type these things in every time that you log on, because you can tell it to remember the access point and it'll authenticate you as you get there. AES, CCNP encryption, AES is part of the WPA2 personal. So WPA2 is going to be the most secure because it does use AES encryption, which is the latest one adopted by our government. An algorithm, privacy, pre-shared key. These are just the security mechanisms and this table should be in the book. I know it's in the book. Enterprise-wide, I want to talk a little bit about 802.11 enterprise-wide.x is the one that really should use, and then we'll get done with this one, get a break, and then do the next one and get back into actually configuring enterprise-wide security. 11i is a wireless security standard. The two main weaknesses, encryption and authentication, addresses those two. Encryption is accomplished by replacing WEP's original pseudo-random number generator RC4 algorithm with a stronger cipher that performs 3 steps on every block, 128 bits of plain text. Triple DES, which is one of the encryption protocols, does that. What it does is uses the DES protocol 3 times. What they found out when they were looking at this thing, and DES is like a 1987, it's a really old protocol, has been compromised, but when you use it 3 times, it becomes really secure. What they found out is if they ran it twice, it really didn't do a whole lot, but the 3rd time did that. And if you use 3 separate keys, it makes it even more secure. So what this does is does a triple encryption. Authentication and key management accomplished by 802.1x standard. The 802.1x protected extensible authentication protocol. You're here at PEEP. There are a couple of different ways that we can do that. So we're going to have an authentication server. The laptop down here is going to be in the 802.1x world, the supplicant. I think we talked about that a little bit once before. The supplicant is the thing that's trying to get on. The wireless access point is going to be the client. And then we have an authentication server of some sort. The protocol that we're going to use is the radius protocol. The radius server contacts the authentication server to see if you've put in correct credentials or if credentials are there. If we were authenticating computers to Active Directory, then we would create a group of machines and say, hey, if this machine is part of the group in Active Directory, then authenticate the computer. Generally, that's probably what you would use for wired connectivity. For wireless, we can have you, and we will have you use credentials on this radius server, which is a virtual machine running this thing up here next to Chris. So the supplicant goes to the access point. The access point says, oh, how about giving me your username and password? Sends username and password, not really, but the process, authentication, sends the authentication hash. It then relays it to the radius. Radius goes to the authentication server. Authentication server says yay or nay. Comes back to the access point. If it's yay, it connects you. If it's not, then it doesn't connect you. And what we're really talking about here, even though we're talking about wireless, we're talking about layer 2 authentication. Authenticating at layer 2 before anything happens in the process. Switch, we're talking about authentication before the port gets turned on the layer 2 switch. A couple of other terms. Key caching stores the information from a device on the network, so if the user roams away from the access point and later returns, you don't have to re-authenticate. And we use key caching. You probably use key caching. I do. Do you use it at home? Remember this access point? That's what we're really talking about, so that you automatically get authenticated. Pre-authentication allows the device to become authenticated to an access point before moving into range of the access point. This would be in a roaming environment in a larger corporation, so that we can do pre-authentication with these things. Medium to large organizations, improved authentication, it's 802.1x, and the encryption is TKIP, the temporal key, the changing key, so that we're going to get different encryption for each packet. And that really helps out, doesn't it? If we don't use the same thing, the same key to encrypt all the packets, if you have a different key to encrypt every packet constantly changing, then it's going to be more secure. 802.1x is an authentication protocol. Important thing here, does not perform any encryption. Encryption is done by a separate protocol. So all it does is get you in. Everything else is done someplace else. Highest level WPA2 is the highest level, 802.1x, and the encryption of AES CCMP. Most robust authentication for WPA2 enterprise models. Encryption is based on a stronger AES, and again, we keep coming up with this AES CCMP. 128-bit key, 128-bit block are mandatory for WPA2. So WPA2 is really using AES as the encryption protocol. 802.1x can be used for the authentication protocol. And the 802.1x exchange is encrypted. Protected extensible authentication protocol, protected because of the mutual not mutual identification. The server actually has to identify itself, and the client has to accept, the supplicant has to accept it. Then access points are those that connect with some other thing. All they really are access points out there. They don't do any of the processing. They don't do any of the checking. When somebody tries to connect, they relay the information to a management device. It can be managed from a central location. Authentication is performed in a wireless switch. So we have these. This is a thin access point. All of the information that gets sent to it gets relayed to the wireless switch. The authentication and encryption is performed on the switch itself, not on the access point. So they don't really have any management at all. Wireless VLANs, and that's what we're using here. That's why when you get on the wireless, you get on a VLAN. It only allows you to go to the network. If we could get on that other one, and no, I don't know what the key is. If we could get on that other one, it actually is on a VLAN that allows you to get on the local network. It's designed for these carts that go around so that they can actually access resources. And it's supposed to be, huh? Well, a lot of the rooms don't have the projectors. They have a wireless. They have a computer with a wireless card in it that's got a projector on it. They call it the wireless carts. Many organizations set up 2 wireless VLANs, one for employees and one for guests, and that's kind of what we have here, 2 VLANs, one for internet access, one for access to resources. Separated at the switch. The packets are separated at the switch to put them on the separate VLANs, and that's what this picture is supposed to be representing. Packets can be separated. You're going to have switches, access points that support VLANs. My Netgear doesn't. My D-Link doesn't. The more sophisticated ones allow you to have multiple SSIDs and multiple VLANs, because how are you going to separate them by VLAN? It's going to be by SSID. And then we can manage the SSIDs, the authentication by SSID, and those sorts of things. And then you get put on a particular VLAN. Rogue discovery tools, and again, I think this one is really paying attention. NetStump or something like that, where you actually do scan to see which access points are available, are out there, to see if somebody has put one on your network. Wireless probe, desktop probe, access probe, dedicated probe. And there are some pretty sophisticated wireless devices that have access points that actually probe for rogue access points and then report their presence. Desktop probe is a PC, and a net stumbler would allow you to probe for those. And manage switch down here, the access point probe, dedicated probe, road access point. They're showing these access points here have the ability to probe for those things, and you have the unapproved device. Or we could have a laptop out here scanning for what's going on. We can look at those things, and we can look at that when we set up our rogue access point, our secure rogue access point here in a little bit. Scan for it to see what's available and what's not available. So wireless, I guess that was a lot to say. You need to take steps to make it secure. There's lots of things you can do, lots of little things you can do, but it's still relatively insecure because anybody can get to it. unless you take some pretty extensive measures with the Faraday cage to actually stop the signal from going somewhere. Anything that's encrypted can be decrypted. Anybody that can get close enough can receive the signal. So we may have some real issues with this. What you want to do is make it as secure as possible, change the access, change the encryption. If you're using Preshared key, change the key occasionally. The kind of standard security procedures. And that would be part of your wireless security policy, wouldn't it? What you're going to do with those things, what you're going to use, how often you're going to change them. Questions? Everybody's asleep. Comments? Let's take a break.
I have a question for you. Ramon